Hello, this is Mr. Bryce. I wanted to do another example of this idea of finding a confidence interval where we just had a bunch of data and we had to analyze it. So we got this data. This is 10. We took a smartphone, we charged it to full battery, and then we saw how long the battery lasted until it turned off. So we did that 10 times. And what we want to do is use this data to get an idea of what the mean battery life of this kind of phone is. So again, we did this a bunch of times. Obviously, this we're going to get different results every time, but we can put this data together and still get a confidence interval. So notice here that we do not have the population standard deviation. So what does that mean? It means we're going to have to use t-intervals, right? Because if we knew the standard deviation of the population, we could use that, and we could use z-intervals to do it. We get a little bit of a better interval. But here we can approximate that by using the the sample standard deviation, and it'll still work. We just won't get quite as good an interval. So we've got this data, and we just enter this into the calculator just like we do everything. So in L1, I've already got all this data in here. Let me just make sure here. So I do have 10 things, and all I did was enter in this data. So if you want to pause it and do that yourself, go ahead. So now we've got our data in here. What we can do now is go back to stat tests. And like I said, since we don't know the population standard deviation, we have to use t-interval. So t-interval, and remember up here there's two different things you can use. Last time we used stats because we just had a summary of our sample. This time we actually have a sample, so we're going to use data. And notice it asks you for different things. It asks you for the list. I always use L1 for everything, so that's L1. This frequency just basically says how many times each of these things are in the list. So for ours, it's just going to be 1 because these are the only 10 we have. This is always going to probably be 1 for anything we're going to do. And then the confidence level, we want a 90% confidence interval. So 90%, go down here to calculate, and it should give us an interval. So here is this confidence interval for this population mean of this phone. So what is a 90% confidence interval for the battery life of this phone? It's between 9.2, I'll round it to the nearest 100, and 11.58. So remember what this means. This means that we are 90% confident that the mean battery life for this kind of phone is between 9.2 and 11.58 hours. So if you got one of these phones, you could expect it to probably last anywhere between there. What if we wanted to increase this accuracy? Now we could change our confidence level, but we would be less confident, right? Like for example, I could say, let's do this again. But this time, let's change our confidence level so that, let's say, we only want to be 85% confident. Well, that's going to change this confidence interval. It was this, and notice what it did. It made it a little bit smaller. So we can have a better accuracy here at the risk of being less sure of this interval. Because we're only 85% sure that this smaller interval has our population mean length in hours in it. So that's something we could do. But what if we didn't want to do that? How could we increase this accuracy? Well, remember how the sample mean is distributed, right? So distribution of the sample mean. The mean of the sample mean, so the mean of the sample mean, is the same thing as the population mean. So in other words, this is mu x bar, and this is mu. And the standard deviation of the sample mean is the standard deviation of the population over the square root of the number of things in the sample. So what that means is if you increase the number of things in the sample, you can increase the accuracy here. So one of the things we could do to increase the accuracy of this interval without changing the level of our confidence is to get a bigger random sample. So we could say do this 50 times instead of just 10. And that would give us a better idea of what this mean really was. So, like I said, that was just a quick example of how this works when we don't have summaries of our data. We just have the data. And you can just enter it in L1 and instead of stats, tell it to do data, and it'll do it that way. As always, if you have any questions, let me know.